My name is Lar Yang, and I've been in the Fresno business community since like 1996. I came to America in '79, and I was 4 years old, so I landed in San Diego. And we got to America, and we were our parents were saying we were at war with the communists, with the Vietnamese, and we ended up in a military town with a whole bunch of Vietnamese people, and I was like really confused. And then I thought, all of my uncles, they were all in the war, they were veterans, and we didn't know nothing about it. There wasn't any information about it, right? And so it was kind of confusing, and we faced a lot of angry people who were, who had lost sons in Vietnam and wondering why we were here. But I think that growing up in America and then having the sense of not really belonging, like you don't really belong here, yet you don't know why you're here because our history has been classified for so long. I think it kind of made me really interested in figuring out how to tell that story. I am like every generation of kids has that Hmong kid that's just always in the back drawing, and that was me. I love drawing. So and besides drawing, I loved it when when the little kids got together and played. I would go sit with the old guys and listen to them tell stories, and I was really moved by their stories. And for each generation, those things that really change people's lives, right? Gives them like strength, gives them all these things. And so I was really interested in those even as a little kid. So I started to kind of collect all that. As I became, as life in San Diego got a little harder because more and more people were competing against Mexicans for work, and then so San Diego, like 20-30 of my Yang clan people, they took a trip together as a community, and they went all the way up to Chico, and they stopped at every little town, and then the whole 30 families decided they want to move to Modesto together. So we moved to Modesto, and I grew up in Modesto. Again, with a whole bunch of Vietnamese and Chinese and really open community. So I grew up not with a lot of Hmong people, I studied, I really wanted to do art, and nothing else. I believed I wanted to really do art as a living. And I fell in love with graphic design in yearbook. And then I went to San Jose State because that's a really good design school. So straight out of school, I went to design school there. Because so many of my friends were Vietnamese, I ended up going to the Vietnamese New Year. And so back in the early 90s, and it was a lot bigger than Hmong New Year, but basically the same thing, and so I had like all of these things of what Hmong New Year could be, but in a bigger community, right? It was basically the bringing the concerts, bringing all that stuff. And so I got exposed to a lot of that. I'm like, you know what? The Hmong community could do something this big. And so I already been growing all those ideas. And then when I came to Fresno, I met my wife when I was at San Jose State. And then my wife was coming to Fresno State. And so I came to Fresno State. I studied fine arts with an emphasis in graphic design. And I graduated out of there. And when I, being somebody from a small town like Modesto, there was really not a lot of role models, people that really were doing inspirational things. And then when I came to Fresno in 95, 96, we went driving down Belmont, and I saw all these Hmong businesses, and I was just amazed that Hmong people had so much potential, and I wanted to be part of that community because it was really exciting that there was so much potential for Hmong people, and my dad always says, if you want to do well in business, you have to find the support in your own community. So my dad chose to come to Fresno to buy homes back in the early 90s. And so he started buying a bunch of homes back then when they were really, really cheap. And that's how my family came here to Fresno. I had finished school, then Fresno was really booming. There's about 45,000 people here in Fresno in the late 90s to 2000s. And it became a big market. So there was a huge boom in movies and music. all of the biggest acts in the world were coming out of Fresno. And then I got really lucky that I worked with some of the best people like Paradise and Sounders and all of the big people, Sonicky, Apple Video, all of them. I did all the packaging for them for over 5 or 6 years, some of the biggest players, and got to be part of that. I believe that for you to, what you give away comes back to you. So if you really want things for yourself, you really have to give it to others first, and that really was shaped by an interview I did with Shuocha. He was one of the first businessmen here in Fresno here. But I interviewed him, and he told me about his story. And then he said something at the very end that kind of really inspired me. He said that, Lar, like the way we have to think about supporting each other in the community is that if I do something for you, you don't have to do it directly back to me. You do it to the next Hmong person. And so you kind of pass it on, right? And that's the way that we circulate. We shouldn't think about what we create in terms of like directly impacting us or benefiting us back, but really that we pass it on within the community so we support each other. Like pay it forward. So he's a really instrumental person. I think most of my career as a designer, I work heavily in the Hmong community, but I worked really entrenched in American things too, in the nonprofit sector, in government sector. I worked with M150, like a lot of promotions throughout the different years, and the marketing. I was all behind all that, driving all that too. But the greatest advantage of being a business person, being a graphic designer, producer, is that you really work with entrepreneurs, solve their problems through the process of design. That I got to meet so many people who were so gifted and talented, and working with them and helping them execute like the different steps of their dream and their companies really like opens up your perspective on how to execute like things from beginning to end, and so, and then for Hmongstory 40, I think we decided it was time to do a little art exhibit, and that turned out to be a really big 3-city exhibit, Fresno, Sacramento, and Merced. We had really successful exhibits there, and the collections kept growing and growing, and some people I didn't even know, like they were just really interested in leaving us stuff, so they just kept bringing us more things. And these are all firsthand people who were there in Laos, and they had all the negatives and everything. So, and because we knew other pieces of the history, by the time that came in, it just kind of made sense for us, the context. And so that process probably took about 15 years, but that's how we grew the Hmongstory 40 and Hmongstory Legacy collection. Like whatever you achieve in your life is about how much time you pour into it. And I think I poured so much time into it that there won't be there'll be very few people who will be willing to invest 15 years of their life to learning something, And so I think because of all the time that I spent, the stuff I had was too valuable. And because without the pictures, without the firsthand stories like that, the history just couldn't exist. It couldn't stand on its own, And so I felt kind of like this obligation of like, you do what you to power you to dollar nature holding she like nature about what in nature or picture and that kind of keeps me going, I think, you don't want you in China. I think every Hmong person, if you're guy that in China, then you're just lying to yourself. You in China, you do she has, a certain time in your life where it's really, really important to you. Through the work with Hmongstory 40, Fresno State approached us to put some of our collections into a digital archive. So we work with special collections at the library, and we developed a digital archive that it was within the Omeka system that universities across the United States, they use for research purposes. And so we worked really hard on putting Galen Berry's collection in there and Erica Higgins' collection in there, because if we had just hosted it on our own site, it doesn't have the prestige that being inside of an accredited university, it gives you that that affirmation that your work is very credible. And so we knew that the future of Hmongstory 40, Hmongstory Legacy, were going to have to be more than just brick and mortar displays inside of different things. We have to put them into digital places and then archive places as well, virtual places like that as well. And we also worked with OCD, the program, and then state of California, and then helping to develop that model curriculum. We were a big part in curating a lot of the assets that teachers used and providing the pictures and documents, things like that, for them to use for their development of their curriculum as well. Galen is the one that we profiled in the Fresno State exhibit. He's the one that left us all the Hmong guns.
So tell it to the camera.
Yeah, yeah. He's the one who left us his collection with all the Hmong guns and the mortar shells and all those and tons of pictures about the Secret War. But that we had gone out to visit Galen, and then he had all these amazing things that he had preserved from the war, because he worked for IBS. He was able to put it on a big drawer and brought back tons of history and things like that, and he gave it to us. And so the third time I went to visit him, he had packed everything up in a nice box for me, and so all these things, he just gave me all his pictures and these guns and all this stuff, and I put it in my truck. I put it in my truck, and I was driving home, and I was really thinking about it. I'm like, dang, that's some really, really important stuff, and I was stuck in traffic, and I started crying in traffic because the value of what it could do, these things, and people being able to see them and being able to be transformed by all the history. Like I thought about how heavy that was, and I was stuck in traffic, and I started crying in the LA traffic, because I was so emotional about like the weight of all that he had preserved and what he had spent his life doing, with the Hmong people, and so I kind of promised myself that I would use all his stuff to kind of inspire people with it, and that's where along that experience, that story is when I learned that the greatest gift you can give someone is the gift of history. So Erica Hagan, she was a Hollywood actress, and she had done like Rockford Files, Wonder Woman, Land of the Lost, like a 70s like era traveling. She decided to travel to Asia, and then she went to Thailand, and in Thailand, there was a tour guide, and the tour guide said, hey, you want to go and see these refugee camps in northern Thailand? And she was, oh yeah, let's go check it out. And she went there, and she kind of fell in love with the Hmong people, the whole thing, and she learned. She taught them English, and then in terms they taught her Hmong culture and Hmong history, and so she was documenting all that. And then after 2 years or so, she came back to the United States, and she got a big grant from Catholic Charities National, and she traveled across the United States, going on radio stations and television stations, and she would connect like one family of church, like one church family with one Hmong family across the United States, and she did that for years. And one of her interviews, she actually came here to Fresno, and she went on KMJ, and she was talking about the Hmong experience, and the superintendent of Fresno at the time was actually listening that day, and he was really moved by what she was talking about, and he wanted to meet her, and so they arranged a meeting, and she went and talked to him, and then he's like, I'm really moved by what you're doing. Can I help somebody, right? And so he said. Erica said, yeah, I have some people that might be looking for work. And so the first employee that Fresno Unified actually hired was Misty Her's father as a custodian, because of that radio station interview and KMJ interview that Erica did with KMJ. And so she was, her father was an interrogator for the CIA, and ended up being a custodian for Fresno Unified, the first employee of Fresno Unified, because of Eric's interview. And today she's, leader of the 5th or 6th largest school district in California. America, she was over in Africa. She's an amazing person. touched so many lives, and we scanned a couple thousand pictures of her from her collection, and she helped people from all walks of life, from all kinds of backgrounds, and just an amazing person. But you meet people like that and you go, man, I don't do enough in my life. Yeah. And so our hope is to be able to secure a home port here and always have it here in Fresno, and like I always say, we need to kind of train, do a national campaign to train people that, hey, when your kids turn 12, instead of taking them to Disneyland, you come to Fresno. You come to the center. They can stay here for a week. They can come to the Hmong New Year, experience Hmong culture. They can come to the cultural center in the museum. They can take Hmong classes. They can view the exhibit, and then completely transform their lives. And so the only thing left missing is, I believe if we were able to secure a land and build a facility, we have everything else we need for it. And I think that it will continue to draw people to Fresno because it would be something really unique. And I think not just Hmong people, but I think it would be a national and California attraction. I think people from all over the place would come and see and experience it. But in my 30 years experience as a designer, a producer, and everything, you got to do what you love. I think when you do something you love, you learn 10 times faster than when you're doing something that you don't really like at all.